Welcome to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. If someone in your life has BPD, you know how difficult it can be, and you need to learn how to heal from those toxic relationships. And that's where this show comes in. Expert education, expert knowledge, expert insight, and delivered with compassion and empathy. With your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. To purchase and book sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. Now your host, AJ Mahari.
A couple things before we start this episode. I have a website for this podcast, and it's at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. Interactive website. It's a website is its own feed for the podcast and also for my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to get a lot of the videos that aren't in this podcast, you'd like to check those out, you can do that at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. I would just like to encourage you to please leave a 5-star rating for this podcast if you find it helpful, to help this podcast keep growing and keep reaching more and more people who could benefit from this content. I get a lot of people with BPD rating it at 1 star because, they have all these problems with what I'm saying, and they think it's horrible and disgusting and all that kind of BPD kind of stuff. This podcast website is survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. And now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the podcast, or welcome back to the podcast. This is the 3rd episode and final for now, but I'll be doing more on BPD and men with BPD. But in the first part of this podcast episode series of 3, I did part 1, which was the broken BPD man fantasy. And if you haven't heard that one first and you're a woman and you're interested, please go back and listen to that before you listen to this one. And then before you listen to this one also, please make sure you listen to part 2, episode number 2 in this podcast series of 3, called Borderline Men Unmasked. If you've just found part 3 of this 3-part series about men and borderline personality disorder, and you'd like to hear parts 1 and 2 before part 3, please go to ajmahari.ca/podcasts, and you can either listen in the podcast player, or you can go down the right-hand menu and you'll see 1, 2, 3, the episodes in the order in which you might like to listen to them if you haven't heard the first 2 first. And you can always check out my website at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com that has not only my podcast feed where you can find all 3 episodes in general, but on that website, and my YouTube feed as well. And now I'm going to get in to part 3 of this series, which is part 3 of 3-episode series on men with BPD, which is just a beginning. I'll have more coming on men with BPD as well. And this is called The Invisible Borderline Man. Why women don't see him coming. So as I said, this is the 3rd part of my Borderline Men series in this podcast. In part 1, we looked at the broken BPD man fantasy, the illusion that keeps women trapped. In part 2, pulled the mask off with the podcast episode Borderline Men Unmasked. In that podcast, I uncovered 7 raw realities of borderline men that women need to know. And today, in this podcast episode, part 3 of 3 for now, I'm going to go even deeper. I'm going to talk about the invisible borderline man and why you, as a woman, don't see him coming, or if you happen to be a gay man, you might not see him coming either, why he often goes undiagnosed, and how his mask of charm and intensity keeps women, or I will say also gay men, hooked before the darker realities even surface. Let's unmask the invisibility together. So part 1, why is the borderline man invisible at first? Borderline men rarely show their chaos right away. In fact, many appear charming, magnetic, and deeply attentive in the beginning. They mirror your values, your dreams, and even your vulnerabilities. They are really living through you at this point, like women do with men. They are not really seeing you, but they are sort of basking in the glory of the gaze and the shadow, the sunlight that you seem to be in, because they don't know who they are. This intensity of the borderline male can feel intoxicating, like you finally found someone who sees you. But that intensity isn't the same as emotional stability. It's often the borderline man's way of attaching quickly to ward off the terror of abandonment. Invisibility begins here. The early storm feels like passion when it's really pathology. And part 2, the cultural blind spot. Society doesn't expect borderline men to exist. In fact, I hear often from men out there listening to my content about borderline women, which is most of it, unfortunately. I'm trying to change that here. And so many men out there don't believe that borderline men exist. So society doesn't expect borderline men to exist is no over or understatement. When men act out in rage, they're labeled as having, quote, anger issues. When they drink heavily, they're called, quote, alcoholics. When they're manipulative, they're misdiagnosed as narcissists or antisocial. The truth of BPD, the abandonment terror, the splitting, the fragile identity, lack of identity really, is almost invisible in men because women are trained to see them through other lenses. This cultural blind spot makes the borderline man harder to recognize and even sometimes harder for professionals. And number 3, the red flags women overlook. The invisible borderline man doesn't hide because he's flawless. He hides because women reinterpret his red flags as love. Jealousy feels like protectiveness. Possessiveness can feel like passion. Intensity feels like chemistry. Control feels like care. These are not signs of stability. They are signs of instability reframed as devotion, but with capital N neediness. By the time the cracks show, the rage, the devaluation, the threats, the partner is already emotionally invested and trauma bonded. Part 4. Why women don't recognize him, the borderline male. Part of his invisibility comes from the woman's own lens. Codependency, rescuing, and the fantasy of the, quote, broken man, unquote, all contribute to overlooking reality. When you're primed to heal or save someone, you see his pain and miss his patterns. You excuse the early control, you rationalize the jealousy, you cling to the idealization because you're seeing him through the fantasy, not the truth. This doesn't mean you're weak, it means you were drawn in by the very mask that the borderline male knows how to wear. Part 5. The cost of his invisibility. By the time the borderline man's mask slips, when the rage erupts, when the control escalates, when the battering begins, the woman is already deeply attached. She's invested in the fantasy, bonded through the trauma, and often doubting her own instincts. This is the cost of invisibility. You don't see him clearly until it's too late, and even then, leaving feels impossible. In closing, this series has now taken us through 3 layers. The fantasy that draws women in to the borderline man, the unmasking of the borderline man's hidden realities, and now the invisibility that keeps him hidden until you're already super entangled and trauma bonded. If you've been through this, or if you're going through this now, please know or please remember, it's not a failure on your part. You didn't see him coming. His invisibility is part of the disorder and part of the mask he wears to survive. Clarity is always your first step, and with clarity comes the power to protect yourself, to heal, to work with someone. I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you, to be able to break the trauma bond, heal the codependency, do your family of origin inner child healing work to individuate and to move forward into peace. And this brings to the close my 3-part series on borderline men. We began with the broken BPD man fantasy, moved into BPD men unmasked, and today we've uncovered the invisible borderline man. My hope for you is that these episodes together bring you the language, insight, and strength to see through the fantasy, to recognize the reality, and to protect yourself from what was once invisible. Walk forward with courage. You are worthy of clarity. You are worth peace. And you deserve actual, real, mutual, reciprocal, healthy adult love that is safe. And you are worth love that does not harm. And it won't be the last that I'll have to say on men with BPD, but I just felt like I'd been remiss in not doing at least a podcast episode or a series of 3 here like I've just done. I think it's really important. And even though we might hear some men saying, well, women do this to us too, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's true and maybe there are overlaps, but I still think that the borderline male for women, and really for gay men as well, can use a little bit more attention under the spotlight of just what's going on with borderline personality disorder in men. Something not talked enough about, and something that a lot of women and a lot of gay men are equally struggling with in their own relationships. And as always, take care.
You've been listening to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast with your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. For more or get sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. See you next time.